Good morning, class. Today we talk about classroom assessment. Today's topic circles around three key issues. One, teachers can assess their lessons before, during, and after their implementation. Two, teachers can assess a student's progress during and after performing tasks. And three, assessment should be related to the objectives and authentic to the students. So let's take a look at what we have covered so far. We teach to the standards, which are broad statements about learning outcomes. But as you know, standards are broad. We need to narrow them down so that they are teachable. And that is how we have objectives, which are short-term plans to reach the standards. In a lesson, we formulate two types of objectives, content and language objectives. The content objectives pertain to the content demands, while language objectives address language demands required to access the content. Then, to realize objectives, we come up with class tasks, which are engaging and consider a student's personal and academic connections. So far, we have pedagogically done our best to help students learn the lesson. Now, the next thing we need to do is to assess the effectiveness of this process. In other words, our assessment strategy will help us and students see if the relationships among objectives, connections, and the task process and product work. It is through assessment that we can then evaluate, that is, take academic decisions on lesson design and modifications, student progress and abilities, possible remedial courses, and so forth. Let's take a look at an example. In a third grade science class, the content objective is students will be able to identify what plants need to stay alive. One of the students' connections to this objective could be, what are some things that you need every day to stay alive? After activating students' backgrounds as part of the task, the students could work in small groups, looking for and writing the words water, nutrients, sunlight, and air, and then place them on the vocabulary word wall in the class. One of the ways to see if the task works effectively to help students meet the objective is to observe how students participate in the activity. Are they focused? Do they engage in group discussions? Are the tools useful? Do they need any support? Are the products accurate? So, through observation and equipped with a checklist to guide inquiry, the teacher could develop an idea of how successful the task is. Check your book for more examples. Of course, there are various other ways in which the teacher could conduct assessment, which we will now talk about. There are two broad categories of assessment measures, traditional and alternative. Traditional assessments are those formal measures, such as multiple choice and true or false tests, which have traditionally been used to assess students' learning. These measures are usually the same for all students and typically test a student's recall of discrete content or language items. The reason they are so predominant and often required in classrooms is that they are efficient, simple, and useful for getting a general idea of class performance. But as you can tell, their one-size-fits-all quality is their most challenging disadvantage. On the other hand, alternative assessment measures are open-ended methods which show what students know and what students can do in the process of creating their answers. Examples of alternative assessment measures include verbal reporting, observation, oral interviews, demonstrations, retellings, role plays, portfolios, and journaling. Since they are open-ended, they can better capture the complex nature of learning and be used to help students grow. as you can tell, all learners, including English language learners, can benefit greatly from alternative assessment measures because they are open-ended and they tend to be more differentiated compared to traditional assessment measures. The biggest challenge of alternative assessment measures is the amount of time and work that is required to plan, conduct, and assess the students. That's why a hybrid strategy, that is, using the merits of both measures, is recommended. For example, traditional multiple choice questions could be adapted by asking students to explain the thought processes behind their choices. Now let's take a look at some of the characteristics of effective assessment measures. First, assessment should be directly related to the objectives. That is, it should measure progress toward an attainment of the lesson objectives. Second, assessment should be authentic and or meaningful to the students. That is, it should provide appropriate feedback, help guide students and instruction, and avoid the students' test wiseness, which is when the students answer the questions correctly without knowing the correct answer. Third, assessment should occur in multiple contexts. That is, it should provide students with opportunities to demonstrate their knowledge and abilities in different ways. Fourth, assessment should be ongoing. That is, it should be used at various times during the task or lesson. Fifth, assessment should be integrative. That is, it should assess both language and content. And finally, assessment should balance depth and breadth. That is, it should combine traditional and alternative measures. Today's task is writing the assessment section of your lesson plan. You have developed content and language objectives, and in line with those, you have developed tasks that help your students reach those objectives. Now it's time for you to develop an assessment strategy which enables you to assess the effectiveness of your tasks, your instruction, and your students' learning. What assessment measures do you consider appropriate to assess your students' outcomes? Will you be using traditional or alternative measures, or both? Thank you very much. Please feel free to contact me should you have any questions or concerns. Take care of yourself and see you next class.